Good morning, church. We have multiple things going on today, so I'm very excited about today. I'm just going to introduce this card. If you're fairly new to us, this should be in your bulletin. Connection card, we'd love to have you fill this out if you're new or fairly new, so we can get to know you better, contact you, say hi. We love that you're here. We have a couple new things that have to be talked about. That's why Deb's up here. She went to annual conference, and so she has a report from our annual conference.
Good morning, I'm Debbie. I am your lay leader, so I'm kind of the person who is in between you and the bigger church. So annual conference is the gathering of all the churches. They have two people who vote, the pastor and the lay person. And so I got the honor of attending and voting on the things that matter for the church at large for our conference. Unfortunately, I messed everything up today because I asked to have a couple of slides put into the slideshow, and now nothing's working, so I'm really sorry about that. This year's theme was Love Boldly, Serve Joyfully, and Lead Courageously, which is, I think, fits into what we as a church are in our local church here are really trying to do. The annual conference opened with an inspiring worship service and talk from our Bishop, Cedric Bridgeforth. Some of the highlights were that the bishop asked churches to love boldly enough to allow pastors to breathe, to allow them to have days off. He talked about this being a time to love boldly, that there are forces out there that, sorry, my sentence didn't turn out right. But anyway, we need to look at what's going on in the world and figure out how we can love boldly enough to help change some things that are going on in our country. He cautioned, this is not the time for a timid church. This is a time for courage, for clarity, for a love strong enough to take public form with moral clarity. And he kind of ended the sermon with, is it going to be old or is it going to be bold, as what the church will be doing in this next year? This is my version of the highlights, but there was a lot more that was discussed and voted on, so if anybody has a question, they can ask me, or they can go on to the Pacific Northwest UMC website. And everything seems to be posted, and you can watch all the videos of the sessions that we had. On a sad note, 2 churches in our conference have closed this year, Aberdeen and Magnolia. We voted on, I think there were 14 or 15 petitions that were presented. Most of them passed, but there were a few surprises. A substitution was presented to the budget, stating that raises for the conference staff should be rolled back to their current pay rates, because some churches have been told that they could not reduce their apportionments if they were also giving staff raises. So they felt that it would only be fair that if they cannot give raises to their staff, that the conference should not give raises to the other staff. It is now, that passed, so it is now going back to the budget committee, and there will be a special session to vote on the budget. And it could affect how much we pay in apportionments, because if the budget lowers, then our apportionments lower. In other news about apportionments, it was voted on to look at basing our apportionments on income instead of expenses, because they're finding smaller churches are spending more on expenses and paying more in apportionments than some of the larger churches that are making more income and not spending money. That was passed. It's going to a committee to be reviewed on how it would impact our conference and local churches, and we will vote on it again next year. There was a surprise late petition that passed to support the No Hate in Washington State. We're coming out in support of No Hate in Washington State. There are 2 bills that are coming up in November. One is to say that even if parents have abused their children, have raped them, or otherwise are under investigation for child abuse, they still can get sensitive school records that could have information on gender or other information on students that students did not want their parents to know. The other bill is saying that girls only would, at anybody's question, would be have to go through a genital exam to prove that they're girls, at no matter what level they are in playing sports in the state. So we are supporting no on both of those. So far, Olympia is the only church that has come out in support of the no vote on those. So if you ask me after church, I can give you the website. That was one of my slides I was going to do. The other transgender bill that came up was the transgender neighbors in Idaho are, I don't know if you've heard, there is a bill that went into effect for bathrooms. If you are caught using a bathroom that was not specific to your sex at birth, it's 1 year of jail the first time and 5 years of jail the second time. Oh no, I didn't write it here. It was on the slide. It's transaffirm.org is the website. We can support a initiative that they are making a list of safe trans bathrooms throughout Idaho. So if you want to support that, let me know and I can give you the website. The Circle of Indigenous Ministries presented the Truth and Reconciling report about James Wilbur and his work with starting the first indigenous school in the United States and the harm he caused to the people of the Yakima Reservation. And I am suggesting that on one of our Sundays, we don't have a pastor, that we actually listen to that. It was very interesting and very sad. And finally, after several ballots and a late session that lasted until 10 o'clock on the last day, that we completed the election of clergy and laity as delegates to the general and jurisdictional conferences for 2028. And I have a list of those people. That was going to be another slide. So if you have any questions after church, I would be happy to answer them about annual conference. So we'll move on to start the service. If you could stand for the scripture reading, please.
Could you do the "You Are Welcome" here?
Oh, I am so sorry. I thought Nita was going to do it. Okay. Good morning. Oh, we got the slide. That was that was our wonderful thing. I love that picture, and I love the theme. Anyway, if you want to go to the slide of the welcoming slide, Kurt. Oh, well then it's also in your bulletin. It is on the first page, just under the picture. And You are welcome here. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever you carry, you are welcome here. We celebrate God's gift of diversity and the wholeness we find in shared community. Here, you are loved fully, completely, without exception. Okay, please continue standing for the scripture reading. The Lord who loves us says in Psalms 57, 1 through 3 and 9 through 11, "Be merciful to me, O God, be merciful to me, for in you my soul takes refuge. In the shadow of your wings I take refuge until the destroying storms pass by. I cry to God Most High, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. He will send from heaven and save me. He will put to shame those who trample on me. Selah. God will send forth his steadfast love and his faithfulness. I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the peoples. I will sing praises to you among the nations. For your steadfast love is as high as the heavens. Your faithfulness extends to the clouds. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth." Please join me in the call to worship. In times of joy and in times of struggle, God remains our refuge and our strength. We come seeking the shelter of God's love and grace. The psalmist cries out to God and found mercy. We come trusting God with our stories and in our prayers. God meets us in our questions, our hopes, and our becoming. Nothing about us is hidden from God's love. As we listen, share, and walk alongside one another, may we grow. May we grow in understanding and grace. Come, let us worship the God who calls us beloved, and let us be a community where we are all welcomed, valued, and loved.
I Good morning, everyone. I'm going to shift something really quick because this is weird. Okay. Much better. I like being a little closer to y'all. It's more like having a conversation. Okay. Hi, I'm Chelsea. I am the operations manager here at the church. I have been here since December, and I'm really enjoying it. Since Pastor Stephen was gone a couple Sundays this month, I offered to step in and share my story because I thought it might be fun for everyone to know me a little bit better. Let's just take a minute and prepare our hearts. Father, thank you for being here today. Thank you that you are the waymaker and the promise keeper. Give me the words to say to share this story and encourage my friends. In your name. When I was thinking about what I might want to say to you and share with you this morning, I thought of a story, or thought of a conversation that I had with Nate a few weeks ago. We were standing in our kitchen, as we often do, and having a very deep conversation about life. Sun is streaming through the window, and we were just kind of going back and forth about life and where we're at, and spirituality, and all of these things that we spend time talking about. And he looks at me at one point and says, "Chelsea, what do you know?" And if you have ever, or if you've not yet had the opportunity to have a conversation with Nate, then let me just tell you that this is a normal way to have a conversation with Nate. He will ask you a question, and you will not have any idea what he is talking about. And so I look at him like, "What do you mean?" And he looks back at me, and he says, "Chelsea, what do you know?" And at this point, I'm getting a little bit frustrated because it's an emotional conversation, and I'm like, "I have no idea what you mean." He says, "What do you know about his voice?" And I just stopped. And I said, "I know the voice of Yeshua. I know his voice, and I can follow that." So today I want to share the story with you of how I learned to know the voice of Spirit and the voice of Yeshua. I probably will not make it through this without tearing up. We're just going to put that out there at the beginning. I have some notes, but I also just wanted to talk, so I'll probably go back and forth. When I was a child, I was raised in a family that was a conservative Christian family. They are evangelicals, and that comes with a lot of baggage and a lot of story. But my parents are lovely people, and they loved me and my siblings a lot. And they did their very best to take good care of us, and to be very present for us, and to give us the best childhood and upbringing that they knew how to give us. And so one of the things that my dad would do from my very youngest years was that he was the one who did bedtime routine. And every night we would put our pajamas on and brush our teeth, and then he would read us a story, and then he would sing a hymn to us that we would pick out. We got to choose the song, and we would, and then he would pray with each of us. And it's a beautiful, this is a beautiful memory. One of my very first memories, I'm probably 2.5 or 3, and I am laying in bed. My stuffed animals are in one of those net things up above my head, and I can see them. My brother is in the crib across the room, and my dad is praying with me, and I am praying, and I am saying, Jesus, please come live in my heart. And this is not the first time I've prayed this prayer. I know, I prayed this prayer every night for years, and it wasn't because I didn't think that he was there. It was because I wanted so badly for Jesus to be with me. That every night I would ask, in addition to whatever else I was praying for that night, that Jesus would come and live in my heart and be with me. That has always been the longing of my heart. My family is large. I am the oldest of 7 children, and I love that. In fact, if I've had personal conversations with any of you, you probably already knew that, because it usually comes out in the first 5 minutes of explaining who I am, that I am the oldest of a large family, because that feels very core to who I am as a person. My mom homeschooled us for most of my school career, not 100%, but as we weave through my life, just know that for the majority of that, I was homeschooled, and I will try to this was the time that I wasn't. So I grew up mostly on this amazing 4.5-acre farm-esque space, about 10 miles that way. Actually, it's not even that far. It's right in Midland, just north of 512, and that is my home. That is the place that I called home as a child, regardless of where we lived. That was the home base, where my heart was. And it was a beautiful old farmhouse. It's currently about 120 years old. And my parents still live there. They've moved around but they came back to it a few years, and they live there right now again. And it is a precious, precious place. It was right down the street from the church that I grew up going to. I grew up at Harvard Covenant Church, which is Portland and 85th, for those of you who know the area well. And there used to be a Weir's over there when I was alive when it was still there, but just barely. And I was about 8 years old when the children's pastor at the church asked Chelsea, I want to start doing a children's bulletin on Sundays, and I would love for you to come and help me put it together. I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. My parents agreed, and so every Thursday I would walk from our house to the church. It was not quite a mile, and I would put together the bulletin. We subscribed to a service that would send us, pre-made ones, but I would cut them apart and put them back together to be kind of more on topic for the sermon that Sunday. And then I would photocopy them and fold them. So I have been doing church office things since I was about that tall. And I loved it then, and I love it now. So this was my community. This was my space. I loved my church. I loved my job working in the church office. Once I had finished making the bulletin, I would then help around the office, and I would make photocopies or stuff envelopes or compile papers for the yearly conference or whatever our church secretary needed me to do. I did, and I loved doing it. And then she would usually take me home at the end of her work day so that I didn't have to walk home in the sometimes dark. About this time, my dad felt called to become a pastor. He had a bachelor's degree, but he felt like he was supposed to be in ministry, and he wanted to be a pastor. And so he went started going to Multnomah Bible College to get his master's in divinity. At that point, they had a program that was for adults returning to, coming back to school who might have families and jobs. And so he would get on the train on Wednesday evenings, and he would take the train down to Portland. My grandparents, who lived in Tigard, would pick him up at the train station, take him home. On Thursday morning, they would drive him to school. He would go to classes all day long, and then they would pick him up and drive him back to the train station. He would get back on the train and take the train back up to come home very late on Thursday night. And he worked 4 10s the rest of the week in order to be able to still keep his 40-hour-a-week job at Boeing. It was a very busy season of life for him. But it didn't actually impact our family that much because my parents structured life so that it wouldn't, other than Dad wasn't home for dinner on Wednesday nights or Thursday nights, but that was just the way that it was. And then when I was 9 years old, my parents decided that this was a little bit much, and they decided that we were going to move to Portland, and I was devastated. I did not want to leave my home. I did not want to leave my church, and I did not want to leave my family and my friends, because they were all here. But being 9 years old, there wasn't really a conversation about whether or not this was what any of us kids wanted. This was just the way that it was. And I, in retrospect, realized I was very angry. I am the type of person who I like to know what's going on, and especially as a child, I'm much, much more laid back today. But as a child, I was very regimented. I liked to have things the way that they were, and I was a very methodical person. And it really messed with my world to just be told you're moving. So I'm not exactly sure how I convinced my parents to do this. I don't remember that it was much of a convincing process. They just agreed. And so likely they knew how difficult this was going to be for me, and they wanted to give me something special to kind of make it a little bit easier. But I convinced my parents to let me go to summer camp before we moved. The only week that was available was the last week in June, which was my birthday week. And we were moving on Saturday of that week. But I convinced them that this was a good idea and that I was going to go to summer camp for the very first time. I was going to turn 10 at summer camp. And it was a marvelous week. We actually had some friends that had their nieces were also going, and so they drove me to summer camp so that my parents didn't have to, because they were packing and getting ready to move. And then I spent a great week, swimming and singing and playing games and just having a wonderful time. This is a Christian camp, Camp of the Cascades and Conference Center in Yelm. And so there was lots of Bible themes and lots of funny things that we did around the Bible. This is the mid-90s, so it was what it was. And it was wonderful. I loved it. But I had this context rolling through the week of just this kind of anxiety about moving, but also this was the first time in my life that I had been away from my family for more than a few hours, maybe just spend the night with my grandmother. And for the first time in my life, I was free of all of the responsibility of being the oldest child. And I got to just be me with no restrictions. Just none of the normal ones. And it was beautiful. I loved the freedom to just wander around this beautiful camp, and do whatever I wanted to do that was on the structured things that we were doing, and it was marvelous. At the end of the week, we had this event And it was a fundraising event for missionaries, but it was like a carnival, and we could go around and do different things. And we had one of the things that you could do was pay to vote to have one of the counselors thrown in the lake at the end of the night. So very fun. It was awesome, except for my 10-year-old brain decided that this particular counselor was not going to go in the lake. Don't ask me why I decided that, but that was what I decided. And I didn't want her. So I spent the rest of the money that I had in the canteen, but somebody else had decided this counselor was going into the lake. And so she went and, this counselor got pushed in the lake at the end of the night. And again, 10-year-olds are strange beings. That just really, again, shook me to my core. And it probably had nothing to do with this person going in the lake and everything to do with all of the other things in my life that were out of my control. But I remember just kind of breaking down during chapel that night because there was so much emotion inside of me. And my counselor took me aside, and we went for a walk, and we ended up sitting in the woods. And I explained all of these things as best as I could. And she just encouraged me and loved me. And in that moment, I decided, I know that I am not controlling my life. I am not the one who's in control here. And I want somebody else who I trust to be the one who's in control. And so I said, okay, Jesus, I'm going to follow you. You tell me where to go and what to do, and I will do it. And that was the decision, and that was the decision point. And ironically, that was June 28th of 1997. So today is the day. That is my anniversary day, and this is kind of the day that I put the pin in the calendar, and I say, this is my spiritual birthday. Because there was a radical change in my life over the next few years. Hang on 1 second. So I came home Saturday, we moved, and over the course of the next few years, I moved to Portland. One of my periods of time of not being in homeschooled was during that following year. I was in public school for about most of a school year, just with all of the life dynamics that were going on in our family. My mom said, I can't homeschool you and your brother right now. And she put the two of us into public school. She homeschooled my younger siblings, and then we had two little ones that were not school age yet. And so I'm sure that for her that was, again, marvelous. And I had a great school year. It was wonderful. But the next year I came home again because my mom's like, you didn't learn anything at school. So we're coming home, and you're going to learn at home. So I went back to being home. That was a hard transition because I really had made some friends. I really had enjoyed it. But during that next year of being homeschooled, I would have been 11, and I really started to channel some of the missing the friends and the loneliness that I was feeling into writing in my journal and starting to read and study my Bible. And I started to build this really deep friendship with Jesus during that year. Another thing that was going on that year is that my mother was pregnant. This was baby number 7. My dad was in his final year of seminary, and I was 11 years old, and my mom was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. She also had preeclampsia, and she was very, very sick with my youngest sister. She almost miscarried twice. And the doctors ordered her to be on almost complete bed rest. She had 6 little ones at home. I was the oldest at 11, and she was allowed to get up in the morning and sit in her chair, and she was supposed to stay in her chair all day long, and she was allowed to get up and make dinner in the evening and then she was supposed to go back to her chair. That was her day. That was where she ran the household from. That was where she homeschooled from for that 6 months between the diagnosis and my sister being born and my dad's last semester of seminary. I was her hands and feet. I did all of the running around. I did all of the this and all of the that. We had friends that would come and pick me up and take me to the grocery store, and I did all of the grocery shopping, and then I would come home and, put all the groceries away because, again, that was what we had to do that year. And it was very, my mom had multiple appointments a week, especially as she got to the ends of the pregnancy, where she would go to the hospital for testing and stress tests and all of these things, and we would be at home, the 6 of us, and I was watching my 5 younger brothers and sisters for 2 to 4 hours, 2 or 3 days a week. So I carried a lot of responsibility during that time. I grew up very quickly during that time, and it was just at the time, it was just reality. This is just the way that you do life, because this is what your family needs, so this is what you do. And that year did shape me a lot. My youngest sister was born 3 weeks before my 12th birthday, and I'd say that my youngest 2 siblings, they are a boy and a girl. They are my first babies. I was 9 when my brother was born and 12 when my little sister was born. And the others are my siblings, and they are my babies. And so I didn't do all of the brand new mom things when I had my own children, because I already knew babies were very hard to break. My dad graduated from seminary that same month. There was all of these things, my sister being born, my dad graduating from seminary, me turning 12, all in the same month. And we moved in with my grandparents because my dad was looking for a job as a pastor, but we had to be out of student housing at the university. So we moved into my grandparents' basement for the summer, and my dad candidated at multiple churches over the course of that summer. However, it is very difficult to convince congregations that a brand new pastor with 7 children is a good idea. That was a hard sell. So he did not find a church that called him at that point in time, and he instead kept working at the job that he had been at while he was in school. And he would, and we moved from, school. It was in Portland. We lived with my grandparents for the summer in Tigard. And then we moved to Tualatin, which is right next door to Tigard, for the next my parents rented a house for a year. While they were still my dad was looking for a church, but we couldn't really just live in my grandparents' basement indefinitely. That was a lot for them with 7 children. And we lived in Tualatin for a year, but we had this really drastic shift in my family because new place, we'd never been renters before, there was no maintenance to do, so it allowed my parents a lot more free time to, manage their 7 children. It was a good thing. But my mom shifted back into, fully back into her role as mom, and it left me very much at loose ends in this season of life as a 12-year-old, where all my hormones and body is shifting, and it was a very difficult year for me. And again, I threw myself into journaling. I threw myself into doing really well in school, and I threw myself into trying to get to know Jesus. But it was a very difficult year. I was probably depressed. It was a very challenging year. I was very sad that year. I felt very alone. And that is a little bit of a function of the age and a little bit of a function of all of the life circumstances that were going on. But I made it through. And my parents decided the following summer, Dad isn't finding a job as a pastor. We are just renting this house. We have another house because they had kept our house, the farmhouse up here. We're moving back to Tacoma because this doesn't make sense to stay here in Tualatin. So that's what they did. They moved up back to Tacoma, and I was 13 years old. And so after being gone for 3 years, I came home, but everything was different. We had a new pastor. We had I had grown significantly. So it's very different to have a house as a child, and then to come back and be, a foot taller than you were when you left. It's funny, this is very side, but it's really to illustrate the point of how everything was completely different. We get home to my house, and everything looks so weird and so small, and I do not understand why. And I go running around the house to see all of the places that I grew up in that I love. And I walk out into our backyard, and the backyard is tiny. Like, it looks so small. Now, it's not a small backyard at all. It's half an acre at least. But it looks tiny to me. And I run upstairs to our bedroom, and we all shared a room when we were little in that house. And so this is the room that we all shared, and it looks so small. And I go over to the window, and I put my arms up on the windowsill to look out the window. And all of a sudden, I realized that when I was 10 and we moved, I could barely see out the window. And now I am standing here with my arms resting on the window. I'm like, oh, the house didn't change, I did. So just a funny story to illustrate how much I changed in those 3 years. And it was very different to come back to people who I knew, but who had also changed 3 years worth of growth and development. Kids that I had grown up with, but they were no longer elementary school kids. We were now almost high schoolers. It was a very weird year as I kind of readjusted to knowing these people and feeling comfortable in what had always been my safe spaces. Again, I channeled these things into study and into prayer and into journaling. Those were my escapes. Those were how I sorted through the world and what was going on. I have an entire box of journals that I am currently trying to figure out what one does with after they are full, going back from the time that I was 10 years old. But I am 14 almost at this point. I am starting high school, and people are starting to say, Chelsea, what are you going to do when you grow up? Because this is what you do. When you get to high school, people start asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I, for the record, hate this question. My mother decided that I should be a nurse. I'm very good at math, I'm very good at science, I'm decent with people, and she thought nursing was a great career for me. So she started really in her homeschooling of me, started teaching, making sure that I was getting some anatomy, that I was getting the right sciences. And when I started high school, she made sure that I took those classes. When I was 15, my parents, kind of at the drop of a hat, decided that they were going to move to South Hill because the house was old and it was a lot of upkeep with a lot of property, and they had 7 children who were 15 and under. My youngest sister is, again, 12 years younger than I am, so they had 15 to a 3-year-old. They had a lot on their plates. And they decided having a big house with lots of property that was old and needed a lot of upkeep was not something that they wanted to invest in their time in at this point. So we moved again to South Hill, and again, thankfully we were close enough to still go to church at our same church, though we were significantly further away. But we, that move, again, these moves caused transitions in my life, and they caused the ebbs and the flows that led me to send my heart looking for a safe place. And the safe place that I found again and again and again was in Bible study, in the consistent, like it didn't change. In all of the things, it didn't change. But I also started to hear these deeper rumblings in my heart of deeper calling and today I would say deeper callings to hear the Spirit, to hear his voice, and to not just do the structure of Christianity, but to really know who he was and to love him and to follow where that voice led. When I was 16, I was a Running Start student, which means I was taking college classes, and I was actually taking them full time. I was working towards completing my nursing prerequisites because that was, again, what my mom thought I should do, and I didn't have a better plan, so why not? And I was also working to finish my high school prerequisites, so I had very full college schedules. I also had 2 jobs and an extracurriculars, so I was a very busy high school student, and I remember one night I was I was brushing my teeth before bed, and I was feeling stressed and overwhelmed and slightly angry with God and with my parents for all of this. And I was probably getting ready to do my my final project for high school. We had this whole binder that we had to turn in with our high school career and what we had done with our lives, and then where we were, like our trajectory and plan going forward. And I was probably working on that in this moment, and I was so frustrated by this question that people always ask me of what are you going to do after high school, and I didn't feel like I had a good answer. I mean, I had a good answer. I'm going to go to nursing school. However, I didn't like the good answer that I had. So I was like, I remember kind of huffing into my bedroom and sitting on my bed and saying, God, I am not moving until you tell me what to do. And I don't know how long I sat there. In reality, it wasn't very long. I did not wait long for the Spirit to come to me. And when it came, it wasn't so much a voice as it was these words that dropped into my head. And what Spirit said was the same thing that Jesus said to Martha. Chelsea, Chelsea, you are worried and troubled over many things, but I have chosen for you something that is better. Okay, I don't know what that means, but I have my answer, and I went to bed because he had showed up for me. And so I finished high school. I finished all of my nursing prereqs. I graduated with my associate's degree, and I was done with all of those things right before my 18th birthday. And I was so tired. I was so burned out. I had applied for nursing school in the spring in the winter and spring, as one does when you are applying for colleges as you're finishing up high school, and I had gotten into nursing school. But I wasn't accepted until their winter admission, which meant I had about 6 months of freedom before I had to start school again. And I don't remember thinking it was as marvelous as it was, but it was exactly what I needed to have this time of recharging after a very, very busy 2 years of being a junior and senior in high school. So through kind of some interesting events, I ended up in Europe for about 4 of those 6 months. My parents had always been very connected to missionaries and missionary communities, and they had some dear friends that I had grown up with who were missionaries in France, and some more friends who were missionaries in Macedonia. And I spent 2 months in France with this missionary family and their 9 children. in rural France, just wandering around the countryside in France. I don't know very much about France. I didn't know any French at the time, and I feel like I didn't do anything but see French countryside. But it was exactly what I needed at that point in time. I then spent 2 months in Macedonia with our friends who were missionaries there, and they lived in the city. And that was a marvelous experience. They had only 4 children, so that was like nothing. Actually, yes, 4, sorry. There's 3 girls and a boy. And I just had a lovely time to really rest. I read a lot of books. When I was in France, I did a lot of walking in the countryside. And again, it was the mental and emotional break that I needed to really be able to reset and recharge for the next season of my life. I came home around Christmas time and started nursing school a couple months later. I just realized I completely forgot to say that my dad eventually did become a pastor. When I was 16, we had moved to South Hill, and then we lived there for about a year, and then he accepted a job as a pastor in Graham. So he was the pastor at Graham Covenant Church for 15 years, I think. Most of that was as I was growing up and getting out of the house and doing my own things, though. But I completely forgot to say that I did do that, and he did that for quite a few years before kind of moving on to the next thing. I started nursing school in January of 2006. And I was there, and I was really good at it, and I hated it. I felt out of place. I loved what I was learning, but my spirit was so uncomfortable. It was not the place for me. And so I went through 2 semesters at PLU, and then about finals time in December, I wrote this email to one of my best friends saying, I just don't know what to do. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. And I want to do something different. But I'm at nursing school. You're not supposed to leave nursing school. You're supposed to finish nursing school. But over the next week, it wasn't very long. I was involved in a campus ministry, and I maybe on a Wednesday night, after writing this email, showed a campus ministry, and the message is on taking steps of faith and taking leaps of faith. And at church on Sunday, my dad preached about, in the middle of December, I would like to say, in the middle of December, preached about Peter taking a step of faith and getting out of the boat. In the middle of December, when you're not supposed to be talking about that. You're supposed to be talking about the birth of Christ. That was what he preached on that morning. And all of these things kind of combined and built up in my heart to see, this is not what I'm supposed to do, and I am going to take this leap of faith, and I'm going to take a break from nursing school. There was a ministry in Texas that I had wanted to attend for years. I heard about them first when I was in high school, and it was this very evangelical discipleship program in Texas. The organization is called Teen Mania. They no longer exist. But I decided I was going. And it was the first time I told my parents, I know you probably aren't going to like this, but this is what I'm doing. I was 19 years old. And they, to their credit, said, you are an adult and you can do what you want to do and we will support you. This is a fine choice. And I took a leave of absence from my nursing school, and I went to Texas for a year. And I fully intended to be there for only 1 year and then go back and finish nursing school. The time that I spent at Teen Mania is a whole story itself, and I know that we are already quite late. So I'm going to try and go a little bit faster. The important things for you to know about the time that I was there is, one, my very first week on campus, I had probably been there for about 2 days. I met this amazing person. His name is Nate, and he had been there already for a few years, and he came up to me in this middle of this really crowded room and said, I just want you to know that you are not alone. And then he turned around and walked away from me. That was the whole interaction. But we were casually friends. He was, again, had been there for a few years, and people tended not to cross very much between the years. The first year interns stayed with the first year interns, and then we called them graduate interns, people who stayed more than 1 year, were more of like their own group. So there was not a lot of cross-pollination, but I knew Nate. I actually lived in the same dorm with his sister, and he would come and play the piano in the lobby while he waited for his sister, and I would hear him in my bedroom, and I would come and sit in the lobby with whatever project I was working on. I would just listen to him play because I loved to listen to him play so much. And sometimes we would sit there for, 40 minutes, an hour, and we didn't talk, just I would sit and listen and do my crafting, and he would sit and play. So I met Nate in Texas, and I also spent, a lot of time really learning to hear the voice of God. Just one of the things that stuck with me for years and still impacts today is the passage in Psalms that says, oh, good Lord. I'm going to get the first part wrong. I want to say it says fear the Lord, but I don't think that's the right language. But it's something along the lines of fear the Lord, but it's more honor, respect, love the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And I actually did a word search at one point on this word, and it was talking of the word means, and this is why I can't remember what the word is, because in English it has the wrong meaning. The Hebrew word that is used in that passage is the same one that is used for a husband and a wife being together. It's the same word, and it's know. So, know the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And it's that deep knowing and connection and communication that comes from spending time, lots and lots and lots of time together. When we know God that way, when we know Father that way, the desires of our hearts just match his, and so then our desires become his desires, and his desires become our desires, and we get the desires of our heart because that is what we want. Like we are in alignment with Spirit. I'm sorry, it's so late. I ended up not going back to nursing school at the end of that year, and I stayed a second year in Texas. I told my nursing school I wasn't coming back, and I told my parents I wasn't coming back, and I was staying in Texas. And I stayed another year, and it was another really good year. I had a lot of friends that I had deep connections with. I also struggled a lot with myself over where I was going and what I was doing next, because this plan that I had been telling everybody for years that I was going to go to nursing school and be a nurse was off the table, because I said I wasn't coming back. And I finally get to the point, I was home actually visiting my family during the middle of this year. It was for around my 21st birthday. And my dad took me with him he had errands to run, but I was home, and I just went with him to run the errands. And he asked me, Chelsea, what do you want to do after the Honor Academy? This question. I hate this question. But in that moment, I had clarity. I knew the answer for the next season. And I hadn't known up until that point, but it was just this moment. I said, I want to finish my degree, I want to finish college, and then I want to be a missionary. And that embarked me on the next season of my life in that moment. So I finished my year at the Honor Academy, and I came home, and I enrolled online at WSU. I was living with my parents. I found some part-time jobs, and I started going to school because that was the next part of the plan. There were a large group of us, about 20 college students, who had all been at Teen Mania together within a few years of each other. And we all were in like the Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia area. And we had this very unique experience that you can't share with a lot of people because they have no clue what you're talking about. And so we would get together regularly just for fellowship and companionship and fun. Nate is originally from Minnesota, but he had moved out here about the same time that I came home. Not related, those were not the same at all because of the other, but just this is where God brought him because he needed a new stage of life. And so I would spend time with Nate. I spent time with my best friend Bethany and her boyfriend, then fiance, Patrick. I spent time with these beautiful group of people who loved God and loved each other, and we had a lot of fun together while I was finishing school. Bethany was from Graham, and she had lived there most of her life. We did not meet until we were in Texas, and then during my second year, we shared housing for part of the year. She came home and started finishing school also. She started going to my dad's church in Graham because she didn't have a home church when she came home from Texas. And so we would see each other all of the time, basically every Sunday, and then started hanging out more during the week. And she had this connection to India, that her father had been a missionary there, like short-term missionary there, a couple times when she was a child. And I had always loved India and thought that that might be where I wanted to go as a missionary. So we decided that we wanted to go to India together. And she was going to finish school, I was going to finish school, and then we were going to go to India together. And this was this great, she ended up getting engaged a little bit just before she finished school, and so this was kind of her like last adventure before getting married. I had finished school and was just kind of getting ready for the next thing, but not quite ready for the next thing. And just before leaving for India, we are mid-planning, Nathan and I started spending more time together. We were not dating. This is very important because this is the early 2000s and purity culture and all of these things. We were not dating, but we did spend a lot of time together. And we're exploring what would it be like to kind of get to know each other, build a life together, all of those things. But then also, I was leaving for India, and nobody knew what was going to happen. I might just never come back. So we were not dating. You know how, isn't that funny? Isn't it just silly the way that as, like, that early 20s, sometimes that's really important. It feels way less important now. So Bethany and I left for India. Nate and I promised to correspond, but we left for India a little blind. We knew that we were going to work with a native pastor. The pastor was a connection of Bethany's fiance, but we just didn't have a lot of details about what we were going to do or where we were going to be staying. He was just supposed to be setting all of this up. So we show up, and thankfully he was there and got us, and we stayed with him and his family, and we had great internet access, which we didn't know we were going to have. We were really not sure, like, even how often we would be able to communicate home. Like, we just didn't know. And this is 2011. I think it's 2011. Early enough that, you know, cell phones are still kind of like, we're in India, cell phones are not everybody has one, they're not smart yet, so it's just a different world than we currently live in. It was a great trip. I learned a lot of cultural sensitivity. I was a minority for the first time in my life. I was the only white girl, well, me and Bethany, we were the only white girls around for miles and miles and miles. I think I saw 2 other white people in the 6 months that we were in India. So that was 3. 3 other white people that I actually, one of them I didn't even interact with. She was a lady in a restaurant. So my very first experience as a true minority, and this whole cultural experience also. But during this time, Nate and I are talking. We're emailing. We are Skyping back and forth. We're really spending time together and getting to know each other really well. We would write. We had a blog that we would blog back and forth to each other. We did several different things to kind of continue our relationship while I was there. And all along, Nate is kind of hinting that he has a really complicated story. And he shared a lot of his story a few months ago. So you guys know a lot of that. So I'm not gonna dwell a lot on that. But one of the things that he just kept, there's a lot here, there's things you don't know. Almost don't get too attached until I can tell you the whole thing, kind of thing. And I left in January, I want to say in March while I was in India. I was sitting on a rooftop because in India all the roofs are flat. It was really fun. I loved sitting on the roof in the shade. And I kind of out of nowhere, Spirit drops into my heart, what if the thing that Nate is going to tell you is that he's gay? And that was it. That was just this what if question out of just nowhere. Nothing that Nate had said up to this point was leading that direction. And nothing that in my background would have given me any clues to him being gay. Now, it is important to say, because it's important to the story, that my understanding of what it meant to be gay at that point in time was not the same as it is today. At that point, I was raised in an evangelical Christian home. And at that point in time, my understanding said, being gay is a choice, it's often the cause of trauma, and it is something that you can stop doing. Okay, so it's very important for me to say that this is the framework that I was working with at that point in time. I didn't have the life experience to contradict that. And I sat with that in that moment. I didn't say anything to Nate right away, but it was only a few weeks later, maybe only 1 or 2, that in our conversations, he sends me this email, and he says, I have same-sex attraction, which, again, at that point of time, is the label that was used within the evangelical church to talk about being gay and being homosexual. So that was, even though I had this preparation from the Spirit, which was still to me to this day is just crazy, that I had this moment of preparation before he ever brought it up, to kind of grapple with and think through that for a few days. It was mind-blowing, mind-bending. I didn't know what to do with that. I just didn't know what to do. I had a frame of reference of what that meant, and you have to realize that Nate's story matches to a T all of the reasons that one person might be gay. If within that frame of reference, Nate's story matches that. So there was nothing for me to say, why is he this way, if it's just, that actually makes a lot of sense that he would feel this way because of what I know about his background. It was honestly the framework that we were both working from, not just me, but him. And I took some time. I spent a lot of time with the Father over the next couple days, with Spirit over the next couple days. And I asked him what to do. What do I do with this? And what I heard was, be Jesus to Nate. He has never had anyone in his life to actually show him who Jesus is. And I want you to be Jesus to him. And show him what I am actually like. And in a little bit, we are going to sing the servant song. And that is the song that Father brought to me that afternoon sitting in India. And it defines the portion of my life kind of going forward, of why I did what I did and why I still do what I do. I came home from India. Nate and I spent another 6 months or so not dating. And we got engaged in December. And 9 weeks later, we got married because we're crazy. I committed in that moment to Nate that I was going to be with him, that I was going to stay with him. And I knew about the same-sex attraction, and I said, I love you anyway. I don't care. I love you anyway. We're going to build a life together. And so that's what we did. We lived in Vancouver at the time, and we had a baby. Our son was born about 11 months after we got married. And Abby came about 16 months after that. So in very short order, we had 2 babies. We moved back to this area to be closer to family, and then I embarked on being a young mom. I had worked before that, but I had now 2 babies. Nate had finished college, and we kind of transitioned, me being full-time at home and him being full-time working. And we looked like a very traditional family for the next many years, where Nate went to work, I stayed home, I homeschooled the kids, we had 2 more, and that was kind of life. Underneath that all, Nate was deeply unhappy because it's not easy to shove a gay man into a straight man's life. And in 2022, that all kind of came out. It kind of all exploded. Nate came out to me and said, no, I'm really gay. And I've always been this way. And nothing that I have ever done has changed this. And I've done all the things. I had to deal with some really complicated feelings again, and some really crazy emotions. Feelings of betrayal and heartbreak, like my world was just crashing. One of those days, one of those early days, probably the first week that after he came out, I was sitting on our back porch, and I was talking to Spirit about all of this. And I realized, and into my heart again came the servant song. And I'm just gonna, will you let me be your servant? Will you let me be as Christ to you? Pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too, is the first verse. And this is the reality, is I made a commitment months and months before I married Nate and vowed to love, honor, all the things. I told Jesus that I would be Christ. Like I told him that I would be his hands and feet here on earth and show him what Jesus actually looks like. I was like, that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room, actually. So I started asking a lot of questions, because up until that point, up until August of 2022, I was an evangelical Christian. Like, I lived in that framework. I didn't ask a lot of questions outside that framework. That was what I had been given, and that was the way I lived. And in August of 2022, I started asking a lot of questions. And I read websites about what it means to be gay. I read websites about, I'm like, okay, well, there are Christians out there who say that it's okay to be gay, so why? Why do they say it's okay to be gay? I want to understand. I need to understand. This is now critically important to me. And Nate and I decided we were going to figure it out. We had 4 kids. At that point, Bennett was only 3. And we decided, you know what? We're going to figure it out. So we started building life again. Nate met an incredible man, and our relationship changed. Today, we are open and we are poly. If you want to know what that means, I'll be happy to tell you, not from the stage. And I have gone on this incredible journey over the last 4 years, walking beside my husband and beside his partner and beside my kids, to understand, how do I integrate into this world? How do I reconcile this whole life that I had before, all the spirituality, with the life that I currently live that is so outside of that framework? And it's hard. It's hard today to do that. It's hard to understand how to do that. But I still choose to do it because I know the voice of my Father. I know the voice of my shepherd. And I know who he is. And who he is love. Who he is accepting. Who he is the person who went to the outcasts, to the rejected. And he said, you have value, and I'm going to spend time with you. So, that is my story up until this point. And I am really honored to have been able to share it with you today. I know we are super past time, so I'm really sorry. I think that's it, though. I didn't come up with a really good ending. Sorry. Oh, I am supposed to remind you that as we do the song, tithes and offerings can be left in the plate, and you can go and light a candle at the altar if you would like to.
I do not see any prayer requests in the basket. Is there anyone who needs prayer?
I have one.
Oh, Carol.
So I heard from Pastor Stephen, I'm sure many of you did, that the surgery it was more painful than they thought and lasted longer than they thought. But hopefully she's up walking through an antique store, which doesn't sound really great for, for their decluttering project, but will be good for her legs. So she needs continued prayer as they're going through this process. How's that?
Okay, sounds good.
I mean, I hope that, yeah, it's good for the,
We all have our own recovery
Yes.
process.
Jackie. Oh, she just talked about. Yeah. Her surgery went well. It was longer than expected, and but she's now walking through antique stores. So there you go. Yeah.
well, it was much more painful than she thought,
Yeah.
Jackie. So, yeah.
Hopefully, it'll get better.
So still pray.
Yeah. Are there any other prayer requests? Ron?
Oh, yes.
People of Venezuela. What a tragic thing going on. Oh, Josh. So Josh's friend Jeremy, did you say? Jeffrey. Bladder cancer. He may have bladder cancer. Okay. All right. Anyone else? All right, let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for being with us today. Thank you for Chelsea's story. What a life filled with God, Jesus, and many, many adventures. It was amazing. We just thank you for all the blessings that you have given us. We pray for those who are in Venezuela. Help the recovery effort to get as many people out as possible. Be with Jeffrey and others that need our prayer. Hold them up in your hands. We just thank you for this. Would you join me in the Lord's Prayer? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Want to stand this just a closer walk.
I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk. Let me walk close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee.
Do we have a slide for that or no?
It's on the back side,
Okay, I need it.
on the inside cover there.
Okay.
Do not be
It's
dismayed
made by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say,
but with intention.
So go,
love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you.
And they can. Sure.